A student once came to me at the end of a lecture and said, how is it that when we have examinations, we're not allowed notes, but lecturers are allowed notes? And I said, you know, you're right. So you won't get a readout from me because I don't have any. But this lecture will not remain within the confines of the title. And don't you worry, Ruth. Ruth knows I'm a maverick. Anything could happen. And still anything could happen. But it won't just be about stripes and checks. It'll touch on other matters which have been, it seems to me, a concern within this particular conference. And stripes and checks will indeed be the concern to an extent, and it will relate to that past book. But the thematic components of this book are, sorry, oh, is this better? Or will I hold this? Well, the acoustics are so bad in here. Okay, can you hear me at the back? Yes, you can. Okay. Well, but the components that I'll be crossing, they relate also to these two previous books. Now, it should be noted then that the material I'll be presenting is largely drawn from the three that you've seen. Now, a few years ago, I presented a selection of images to a group of design students in Politecnico di Milano, in Milan, in Italy. And I asked them to select images which they thought represented good design and images which they thought represented bad design. Now, many did select this. They thought, well, he's British, he'll like that. But they chose this as well. But some did not. And some chose this as bad design, but some actually chose it as good design. Some British students ultimately selected this as good design. And they selected this as good design. And I thought, I've got it wrong. So I keep asking and wondering, why is it? So let's go back a little while. Look, in prestigious gatherings such as this, it's often common that you profess that you've been influenced by certain great Western scholars. The one on the right is, of course, closely associated with this city. It may well be the case to some degree, but the truth of the matter is it's lesser known individuals that I feel I've been inspired by over the years. Henry Moore, who I remember when he opened the Henry Moore Gallery in Leeds, he was in a wheelchair and the Queen was opening it. And 99.9% of the people who were there went to see the Queen. But I went to see his hands in the wheelchair. And David Hockney did not draw them correctly. He didn't. So Henry Moore, great inspirational sculptor. Barbara Hepworth, right-hand side. Both of them studied in Leeds, incidentally. Down bottom left, Escher you may well recognize. Do you recognize Bridget Riley? Or do you recognize Lucius Wong? I nearly worked with them in Hong Kong, but it didn't quite happen. Two famous books, Principles of Two-Dimensional Design, which I found greatly inspirational when teaching textile design students, and also his Principles of Three-Dimensional Design. These were published in the 70s, which is very useful for anyone that has to give projects for fashion students. Now, I doubt very much, okay, these we can recognize. I doubt very much if anyone here can recognize that particular individual. And that particular individual, his name is Henry J. Woods. He was a mathematician and crystallographer who was the brains behind a gentleman known as Asprey, known as the John Bull of British crystallography. And he was a physicist, mathematician, crystallographer who had to teach textile design students at Leeds, had to. That was the olden days. Well, he chose to. And he chose to take various concepts from the discipline of crystallography and rationalize these in a way which made them understandable to textile design students. In so doing, he came up with certain what are known as counterchange border patterns, and he was 20 years ahead conceptually of the Russian crystallographers of the time. Now, the reason why I put him there was he was alive when I was a student, but he was long retired. He always had a hearing aid. I don't have good hearing, but I loved his trick. He would walk into a lecture theatre, he would switch off the hearing aid, and he would just talk on and on. But he was he was the supervisor of my supervisor, so there's a bit of a connection there. So I'll be referring to these people at some stage, but what they all have in common is this. Now we're going to go back. What was that? Good design, bad design? I can't answer the full thing, but I can answer it in my own way. I believe that structure underpins form, and all of these people, they thought a similar thing. Structure underpinning form. Let's understand the structure, and then maybe we can understand the form. Currently, I'm still going up that avenue. Systems of proportion are of interest, and various analytical procedures we've developed with research students. Compositional frameworks are what I'm really after, and my emphasis is on application where possible. And what you want me finished at 25 past, is that correct? Okay, I won't let you down. I won't let you down. With certain things that we have to do, but we'll do it by 25 past. So these have been the focus then of my attention in fairly recent years. So these are examples of research projects. Now, images from this particular painting are used often to identify individuals who are associated closely with concepts which underpin the teaching of some modules that I give. Who's the woman? Does anyone know who it is? Well, I've been inspired by this woman due to my youngest daughter, who's a physicist and works for Emirates Airline. She introduced me to Hypatia, but that's another lecture, I'm afraid. And who's this Arab looking over his shoulder? Maybe he had been looking over the shoulder of some Egyptians, maybe before that. And we have Zoroaster here. He's got a globe in his hand. What did he understand about the world? That's probably Euclid. The model for this was probably Michelangelo. The model for this, Plato, was probably Leonardo. So I introduce students to various concepts which are associated with that wonderful painting. And these three particular individuals I do pinpoint as of some importance. Pythagoras, who looks over a shoulder, I'd suggest, of the Egyptians, and Plato, who's towards the center, because that name is associated with certain tilings and certain solid polyhedra. And then it's standing there with Aristotle, and then Euclid over to the right of the painting. So they're of importance. Now, when I show that painting, I have students come up to me and they say, but I'm a painter. I'm a creative individual. I'm not interested in geometry. I'm more of a freewheeling thinker. I'm a creative individual. I don't need your geometry. And then I show them these katagami. These are Japanese stencils used to print paste. Generally have a garment use. Used to print paste, and then that paste resists dye stuff when it's placed in a dye bath. I'm just going to show you a few of them. I have a good collection of them. They were given to me by, I mentioned I worked with a man from Glasgow, Gordon Thompson. Before he died, he willed 120 of these to me, but they're on keen loan now at an archive in Leeds. So here are just 4 examples. And each of them are underpinned with wonderful geometry. Oh, I forgot to tell you, if anyone feels sleepy or tired, it's been a long run. Just go to sleep. It's no problem. But if you want to send your students to sleep, there's the slide. Photograph it. Photograph it. This is the slide. I loved the title of the lecture earlier. Maths. What was it? Maths for everybody sort of thing, or what was it called?
Mathematics for all.
Mathematics for all. All right. The M word. If you use that with design students, you're dead in the water. If you want to send your students asleep, this is what to do. Just show them this. However, you can indeed construct a curriculum which can incorporate these in a hidden way. Oh, that's right. Take a photograph of it. Just give it to Dirk in Belgium. Dirk will love this because he actually has, I think the registration number of his car is Pi or something similar, or Phi, the golden section. It's one or the other. So many of you then are familiar with the concepts that I'll be covering. And many of you have probably tried to communicate to students, but truly, you don't do it this way. The M word you do not use. Now, I'm going to make reference to 3 projects that I've done with students in very recent years. Among the assignments that I give, these are the students in Leeds. There's a project that simply requires them to produce a collection of spots. Okay, spots, very simple. This is Bridget Riley. What do you think it's called? White discs. Have a look. You'll realize why. Okay, it's known as after image, of course. Just takes a while, you'll catch it. So by way of background, we introduce students to these sort of things. I love visual contradictions. Typically, fashion designers, textile designers, they'll pick up on things that Bridget Riley had done in the 60s, and they'll make presentations such as this. Meanwhile, my students, they will go back to Bridget Riley and they'll look at other things. But typically, they will produce something like this. They always imagine, oh, a spot, it's round, and it's equally distributed. And so they'll produce something like this. They'll play with circles. So, oh, I was only playing around and I came across. Invariably, this is what they will do. And then I encourage them, look, start creating a storyboard of some kind. Start being that little bit more creative around the whole thing. Start producing images like this and start to integrate that with the geometry that you don't think you should be learning. And then maybe introduce them to the work of this particular artist. Does anyone know her work? You're bound to. Yeah. Well, I was introduced, the other daughter, my eldest daughter, she said, what, Dad, you do not know the work of? And she introduced me to the work of this particular artist, Kusama.
She's coming to Helsinki now in a few weeks.
Oh, is she?
Yeah.
Okay, send our regards to her. Will you do that, please? Send our regards to her. In fact, give her one of those little, no, they're yours, Ruth. Oh, just not getting them, and that's final. Okay. But would do a good turn, I've heard. I've never met her, but I heard would do a good turn. But make sure you send the regards of the whole conference to her.
That was in the invitation letter, that picture.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. So here are just some simple examples. And the students absolutely adore her work. You know, textile students particularly, highly decorative stuff, wonderful. And there have, of course, been several commercial applications of her work. The Louis Vuitton store in Fifth Avenue in New York, the sort of flagship store, is one typical example. So students will take these sort of things on board and be quite surprised when they realize that some of this is actually applied in a design manner, that it's informed design in some respect. So that's one project that we'll cover with the students. Another project that we'll cover will be to produce a collection of stripe designs. So what do? Well, my lecturers tell me I must refer to nature, so they go to nature. And then they realize that maybe things are not quite as regular as what they would have hoped. But then we have a good collection, a good archive collection at Leeds. So we then get them looking at textiles from all over the world, and probably the most common type of textile design are stripes, and I think it features in the weaving of most cultures, to be honest. So they find these sort of inspirations, so numerous examples they're told to make reference to. And then we get back to Bridget Riley. Bridget Riley is still operating, and her designs have been applied in many fashion contexts over the years. And so they're introduced to this work. Some of them will naturally find their work connecting in some way to Bridget Riley. Or they'll maybe say, well, they always like architecture. Architectural examples are good with students. They could be historic or they could be modern, but stripes can readily be found in modern or ancient architecture. So no problem. And here, this is what students call mood or storyboards. Which need to be produced alongside any project. So when a student produces a collection of designs, they're required to produce story or mood boards such as this, which announce what the end use is going to be, what the sources are. Maybe, well, I like them to design in black and white because that really challenges them. It's very difficult to do. but in their early work they'll be coming up with some forms of colour. And we spell it with O-U-R. That's been driving me up the wall in my time here. It's the American spelling in Austria. It's been driving me crazy. I'm surprised. I thought you would have had British spelling. No?
I didn't have the British spelling.
No. Did you have American spelling? Do you spell? I mean, now you're in North Carolina.
Yes.
Benham Portayimi is a dean there, an old buddy of mine. He'll always help you. Benham Portayimi, Iranian. Nice man. Benham Portayimi. Professor Benham, B-E-N-H-A-M, P-O-U-R-D-E-Y-I-M-I. Very senior. North Carolina State University. He's there. We were students together. You want anything, you say, Michael said, help me. He'll help you. He will. I promise you. So students will end up producing a typical collection of conventional designs such as you see here. It's only 1/4 Ruth. Don't worry. No, don't be worried. Conventional stripes such as you see here or you see here. This would be typical, but then I encourage students to break the rules, but don't ever tell them to break the rules before they've learned to keep the rules. Learn to keep the rules first and then break them. But students, they miss out. They don't hear you say the first part. So you have to be very strict with them, and then once you feel confident that they can keep rules, then allow them to, but do not tell them break the rules, because they assume that they can do it right from the very beginning. I'm sorry if many of you think I'm getting cynical about students, but I'm not at all. Some students are still fantastic, and they give you a reason to be. They really do. So some may choose to produce more radical statements than the conventions that we've seen earlier. More radical statements such as this. Now, so learn to keep the rules before you break them would be one thing I would say. These 4 very simple constructions, students are encouraged to familiarize themselves with these simple constructions. Now, we all know that 3 out of these 4, you can do certain things with them. You can create these grids which can cover the plane without gap or overlap. If I was to give you 100 equilateral triangles, 100 squares, or 100 hexagons, you can readily tile because they can fit. However, these cannot. And they cannot. Now, there's a proof of this in crystallography that I could never understand. It was just too complicated for me. So I came up with a very simple explanation. If it doesn't have the 360 degrees, it won't tessellate or tile. And they give me a chair on that. So they give me a chair at the University of Leeds. Ken Friedman, he didn't get it. He came to the interview, he didn't get it. I got it, okay. So you remember that. You remember a friend of yours got it. You tell Benham he'll love that story. He'll love that story. He really will. He'll love that story. So they give me a chair not because of what I know, but what I don't know. I couldn't understand the other complicated proof. So I came up with something that I used to test them on my 2 daughters when they were age 3 and 6. And I used to test these things on, and they understood them. My rule was the students will understand it. So the students readily understood then how is it the case that there's only 3 regular polygons you can tile the plane with. But you can do other things. You can then produce grids. And grids are my thing, I must say. And you can add, in this process of adding and taking away, it allows you to create these tessellating patterns, these patterns that cover the plane without gap or overlap, readily produced by regular collections of tilings. And some of these have been used in the past. This was a student from Delhi who produced these, a simple collection. By background, she was a business student, and she came in quite readily, so she felt that she got a structure, and on that she built the sort of forms that we've seen within these 2 collections. This was a workshop the outcome of a workshop that I had in Taiwan. Are the 2 speakers from Taiwan here? It was Taichung University outside Taipei, Asia University in Taichung outside Taipei. And these were interior designers. Interior designers or product designers, I forget which. But this young man was exceedingly good and had a strong interest in architecture, and he produced this collection of designs based on the very regular grids that we've seen. So I suppose I've inspired my students to be so conventional until more recently. But when you get to my age, you actually accept change. Young students, they don't like change. They don't like radical views on things. Now, these were done by Nalai Choi from Busan in South Korea. Those 6 designs in the center and those 6 designs there, and these are the sources. She's made a selection of sources. That looks Indonesian. That's certainly Indonesian there. Maybe Thai at the top, but I think Indonesian. Probably West African there, and there's her 6 designs. So took the color palette from various sources and using the grids created the sort of designs that you see there. Yes, students are introduced to numerous other constructions based, for example, on the square. And they're introduced to the thinking of Le Corbusier. And yes, even the golden section gets an airing. But the review that I make of the golden section, although the fashion presentation earlier with the Fibonacci spiral liked the idea, but how is it? These are 4 different images from the internet which prove to us that the ancient Greeks used the golden section in the construction of the facade of the Parthenon. Look at the position of them. They're in different places. They may well have used the golden section rectangle. They may well have, but this doesn't prove that they did. This, in fact, it proves to me there's a lot of very dangerous design academics running around teaching students that they shouldn't be teaching. That's what it teaches me. Well, anyway, we're getting on the Scottish clan tartans now, so don't be worried. So, okay, now that's another project that we do, and it produces, we ask students to produce a range of Czech designs. So Scottish clan tartans then are often a starting point in that. Now some of you may, sorry, do you want it? Yeah, you photograph it by all means. I'm a member of the Scottish Tartan Authority, and the police generally come to me if they want something. They find little scraps of tartan fabric, and they think I can tell them something about it.
I've been talking about this in my job.
Were you?
Yes.
Okay, well, this is a project that we've got a fine collection of very ancient Scottish clan tartans. Some of you may be familiar with these. Tartans were used to identify membership, particularly of families and clans in the area known as Scotland. Though they're not as ancient as some people may expect, at least the system for formal classification, it's only a few centuries old, though Czech textiles themselves were produced long before that, not just in Scotland, but further afield as well. Here's some examples, and I think today they're commonly associated with various cultural events or various activities like that. Of course, Czech textiles were commonly produced outside Scotland, and here's some examples there. Is anyone from Pakistan? Assalamu alaikum, how are you? I've worked in University of Peshawar, and I can remember I was staying in the cantonment area, and I heard this band with Scottish bagpipes, and they have a competition. And I'll tell you what, they were better than anything I've heard in Scotland. They were fantastic. They were absolutely fantastic. So there is a Raj connection, and we have the Sikhs here doing the same. So outside Scotland, it is the case that these Czech textiles have been in use, but some of them have spread there because of the British. Others, I'm not sure. Maybe there's a colonial connection in Central Africa. Maybe there is, maybe there's not. I don't really know. But what we do know is that tartans are frequently used in a fashion context, and the British like to adopt these things, cool London, and they take something from Scotland. They get all the credit for the hard work of the Scots and the Irish. That's right. Okay, so here are some simple examples. There was Vivienne Westwood had produced that. They're used frequently then within a fashion context, and there are some examples here. They're being used in interiors. And then they're used in ludicrous uses such as this, and then you reach levels of insanity and obsession whenever you start putting them down like this. But who do we introduce them to? The great artist, Mondrian. If they're producing checks and of one kind or another, we introduce them to Mondrian. And we've had a number of projects, which we've done also with school kids and teenagers and further education kids, and then my own students at the University of Leeds. So I think Mondrian's a wee bit more sober than some of the outcome of the tartans. So on a more sober note then, the students are introduced to this work, and sometimes you like to connect the lecture up with the assignment, but sometimes it doesn't happen. So you end up giving them the spot assignment, and you've shown them examples from Mondrian, and then you realize that some students have picked up on that, maybe, or they've found these images and picked up a little bit further and thought, well, why can't Mondrian inspire me when I'm producing a collection of spots? So they will collect visual, a broad category of visual statements which they believe connect with Mondrian, connect with their project particularly. And there are just some examples here. All that I show you have been taken from student storyboards one way or the other. Many of them they would have downloaded from the internet. But examples of their work and related visual statements they will show as well. And they will produce checks such as we see here. Ultimately, I suppose that's quite a formal collection of checks. And maybe this is a little bit more formal. So they're making steps towards informality, but I'll show you greater informality shortly. Many related matters are explored in the modules that are delivered at Leeds, and many of you are indeed familiar with this image. Is it, in this case, a series of faces, or is it a series of vases? You may see one, or you may see the other. You may see the elderly, or you may see the young lady. Do you ever drink coffee? Where do you drink coffee? Starbucks? Where do you drink coffee then? At the coffee houses. Is anyone drinking Starbucks? Well, anyone that does, you're not admitting to it, I'm going to put you off it for life. Do you know what they crush in Starbucks? We have that tendency to see faces, don't we? Now, I was walking around here. I'm from this part of the world, the northeastern part of Ireland. It's the land of giants, I believe. And I was walking around here. I was interested in the shapes of the basalt. It was said they're not regular hexagons. There's all sorts there. And I'm walking around it, and I hear a shout, "Hey! Hey!" I took the photograph and I enlarged it later. Hey, there's no photoshopping here, by the way. Hey, can you see it yet? Hey, can you see? You can see it now, can't you? So we all want to see faces, and nothing was photoshopped there. That was just a photograph that we simply enlarged. So I like to show students these sort of things. I'll show them anything if it's going to make them engage, ultimately. After walking the land of giants, ultimately students do find the work of M.C. Escher, thankfully. And they learn in time. They learn about balance and notan, as the Japanese call it. It's about composition as well. It's not guesswork. It's not guesswork. I think non-visual arts people think, well, anyone can do that. No, I have found the great deterioration in the capability of what my students are showing in recent years. But if they make reference to this wonderful work of MC Escher, that's fine. Escher was certainly familiar with the visual tricks associated with foreground and background that we see here. Okay, I'll move quick, Ruth. Certainly familiar with what we see here, and this night and day, and another artist has done something with it. This is King's Cross railway station in London. Some of you may have seen it. You may be familiar with it. I'll come back to it shortly. And it does relate in some way to night and day, where we have the little village at daytime and nighttime, and the white birds flying into the night and the black birds flying into the day. And metamorphosis is something that MC Escher fans will know about, where he will take one shape and he'll allow it to metamorphose into another. So walk into the British Museum, but after yesterday's comment, I'm going to rethink my association with the British Museum. But if you walk in, you see this, and you think, that's a simple grid. Why can't I start to do that with the grids I introduce to students? Why can't I take these moire effects? Textile people will know what I'm talking about. You find it on silk often, how the light hits it. And why can't I take them and just like painting by numbers, put them into a regular tiling arrangement such as you see there? But why can't we then take it and do with it what we saw had been done in King's Cross? And looking up in the British Museum, we got this idea, and that's indeed what happened. I'm nearly finished, Ruth. And here we have, these are 4 points of interest currently. I was in the Hermitage as a visiting something, I forget, but a Hermitage in St. Petersburg. This is Borobudur, wonderful Buddhist monument in central Java, I say Yogyakarta. Hagia Sophia, as many will be familiar with from Istanbul. Anyone know this? Titanic Museum in Belfast. It's wonderful. Absolutely, it's a wonderful. The Titanic was built behind it, just incidentally. But it's a wonderful edifice. And I found that these floor plans, they often fit within this sort of arrangement. Gaudi was very familiar with this, incidentally. And this is known as a Brun star, or many other things. Now, before we leave, we're almost there, Ruth. I'm just going to say that I have certain assistants, and they will deliberately put in my lectures surprise images, and I will not know when they're going to happen. So I thought I'd just pull a number of them together and ask you as teachers, what would you do if you get this? You suddenly look round, and it's in your presentation. You haven't anticipated, and you have to respond to it. It wasn't me, referee. My hand didn't go near it. You just don't know what he's saying. What about this? So this is just a collection of what they've done. Now, I'm going to show you something which contradicts what I said earlier. Design, importantly, structure underpins form. But we're going to read something together. Students from, the University of Leeds know that it doesn't really matter in what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letters are in the right place. Think of how much your parents spent on English education. Right? The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without a problem. Now, this is the important part, because this is when I try to teach them something about modularity and something about Gestalt psychology. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole. Now, can I ask you to read that? What does it say?
Coca-Cola.
No, it doesn't. Have another read.
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola, very good. Coca-Cola at the back. Are we ready? Coca-Cola, okay. This is a, yes please, yes, come on up. And maybe we'll just go back to these people, because maybe they've influenced all of us that little bit more than what we would expect. I've never ever drank before a lecture in my life, but there's no reason why I can't drink at the end of it. This is, you hold on to that. Okay. Just say hello to them, will I?
Hello guys, I hope you're fine.
And this is, oh, this is no messing around, I'll tell you. Jameson's Black Barrel, Whisky, K-E-Y. To accommodate the Anglo-Saxon tongue, they called it Whisky, or Ishke Baha, water of life. And I think that we give these to the 2 stars. but I'll have one with them, so you may bring that back. So thank you very much.
For me?
No, the rest is for everyone.
Oh, okay. So
Everyone, can we bring up some whiskies? We've got some whiskey for everybody. Yes, we've got the glasses. We've got. You go fill that up. Make sure they all get one. And then we have to go on the bus. We have to stagger on the bus, right? Okay. Okay, we got some. These are perfect. Come on. Oh, you got to give him one. Give that man one there. And give the man beside you one. Make sure he must get one. And he must get one. And where's my technical man? Where's my technical man? Make sure he gets one. Cheers. Cheers.